Hey, how are you, Tim?
I am fine. Happy New Year, Merv.
Happy New Year to you too. I can't
Yeah,
believe
did you,
it's
what was
2022.
it? Go ahead.
I said I can't believe it's 2022. It just, you
Oh
know,
boy. It's shocking, isn't it? You had a bit of a break between the end of the year and the beginning of this year, right?
I we did. We took a little trip up over to California and then up to Colorado and then back home again. So yeah, we did. We saw family and friends and did absolutely take a just a nice respite. How about yourselves?
It was the same. Didn't travel, but I had 2 weeks where I wasn't in public, where I just focused on, my own selfish interests as well as taking care of my family and spending time with family and friends. And so it was very pleasant to decompress. I needed that, I think.
Yeah. And here we are, the beginning of a new year, the beginning of a new podcast year.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Um, and it brought to me a lot of questions. So when I was back in corporate life, they always had this strategic planning at the end of the year, and you were going to start a new year. And it was like walking into a new company January 1st. Um, did it feel like that for you for your projects, or is it basically just a continuation of your projects?
Oh, very much a continuation. I had the luxury of getting on a lot of fixed price bids, fixed price projects, and typically with especially with public sector clients, they liked to have that sort of 1 week, 1.5 week break between the Christmas time and the New Year's and shortly after New Year's. So we would always take advantage of that as much as we could. And when we came back after the new year, it was it was hit the ground running because there's no time to lose.
So in corporations, the objectives may change,
That's
but
true.
operational and procedural, you may have a reboot of a new way of getting the work done. And so I kept that mindset to myself. And this mindset has actually worked. Strategic planning is just that for me. And I've always done that. And I just finished that at the beginning of December. What do I want in 5 years? In 5 years, what do I have to have in 3 years? Everything in place to make that 5 year target realistic. And then what do I have to start building this year in order to hit my 3 year goals? And I keep this running, going on a regular basis. And I've been doing this probably for almost 20 years. And
Well,
it served me very well. It's planning and organizing. Now, this is my question for us, and I'd like you to look at that. You started off exactly the way I was thinking. Should we continue our discussions? And this is what I was thinking back in October through December in this show, or should we do an entire different reboot? And this is something of very great interest to me. And from what we discussed, what are your personal opinions on this?
now that you put me on the spot, Tim, I have to think this myself. I really enjoyed last year. We spent a lot of time, and I'm tripping over my own words. So here's where I think that we went last year, which I really liked, and that is we adhered to good project management practice in the way we delivered our conversations. But I like the fact that we bent those conversations more to the human side, to the people side of the equation, rather than just the technology and the process side. So from that perspective, whatever we do this year, I would like to continue to hone in on those people aspects.
Yes, yes, exactly. And you call it bent, and I call it what academic research calls it, quote unquote, tailoring.
Aha.
That's and that's what the PMBOK calls bending the good practice. Basically, help it fit the appropriate situation because we're talking about broad general concepts here, and we need to modify them to an extent.
Well, a little bit modify them. The thing though is I really like to be challenged by our listeners, whether they're new project managers who are learning or seasoned project managers who say, I don't know, I've done that differently. So a lot of what we impart are based on our experience. It's not like if you do this, it will work every time. We're not ever saying that. So I would like some feedback from our listeners. And actually, I'd like you and I to challenge each other from our experience in terms of, this can work in this situation, it won't work here, that sort of thing. So I think this year can be set up to be a lot of fun conversation.
So here's my opportunity for you. I talk to about 450 new students of project management every month, and they challenge me. They challenge me with the same questions that I've gotten. If we don't get feedback, I can bring feedback from the classes and we can challenge ourselves with that feedback, but we all can actually maintain an ear to the ground, and we keep an eye on YouTube with the comments and the questions, and even in live classes. Now, there's another vector going on here that's really interesting. PMI itself is actually changing things. And this is what you and I talked about a few weeks back. The fact that the 7th edition PMBOK is going in the direction that you and I like. And I'm wondering about this.
Well, you mentioned that, and it's like I've been in project management for 30 some years, and finally somebody is doing what I've always believed we should be doing. And that is putting, I'll go back to what I just said earlier, putting people over process, people over technology. And I'll say this, and I probably said this in my blogs, I probably said this on my website, I probably said this in our podcast. In any project in which I personally have witnessed challenges, they have seldom, if ever, been with process or technology. They have almost 100% been with people. So with that PMBOK kind of sliding over in that direction, I'm really, really going to enjoy that.
Yes, and there are even new content that we can bring in. Not only do we have the 7th edition of PMBOK, we have a high-level schedule as to when the 6th edition goes away, and we can talk about that. We also have a new published standard from PMI that's coming out, and we can actually talk about this. This is choosing your wow, which is totally different from, the proper and the ties and white shirt approach that the PMBOK has had.
Well, what's interesting, you mentioned about the PMBOK being basically decommissioned, PMBOK version 6. It will never be decommissioned for me, because if you go to my website, and I'm going to do a shameless plug here, peoplefirstprojectmanagement.com, you will find 156 blog articles that are based on the PMBOK version 6. So it will never go away in my mind. But I like what's happening with version 7.
The beautiful thing is, Merv, that it's not just this, the content of the 6th edition is not just being saved on your website. PMI, and we can talk about this if you want to later, has also created a huge database, and they're migrating all their current standards over there. And they even have things from old standards like the 4th and 5th edition, like critical chain management. They're not bringing it back into good practice, but they're creating an archive and knowledge base so we can do effective research like we've never done before.
Oh, that's excellent. You'll have to point me to those places when they arrive. Sometimes these huge websites become almost difficult to find. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing some of that.
We may have to play some show and tell here in the next few weeks and months. I think that would be exciting. But you know what? Like I said, this is all driven by human behavior, which I'm really excited about too. You had all that technical validation, and I was deeply, deeply integrated into philosophy and liberal sciences when I grew up. My dad was a professor and he taught political science at the graduate level for about a decade and a half. And I grew up around a bunch of professors arguing and debating on a Sunday afternoon while they were watching golf or we were eating dinner. And so to understand the position of principles and of value is exciting to me as well.
So back to your question that you asked me, and I've been mulling this while we've been discussing in terms of new year, new season, call it a new project, or is this a continuation? In some ways, with the change in the PMBOK 7, I think I've thought it through. See what you think. I'd like to, I think, get my arms around some of the new approach to project management as advertised through PMBOK 7 and see if we can't sort of come up with a new way, new format, new process, new whatever it is for ourselves to look at some of the project management principles that we've learned to love and learn to execute over our careers.
So you have the common sense and you have the boots on the ground for decades of working with massive projects. I've come from a consulting environment from all industries and most sectors, as well as I have a huge background in academic research and teaching in project management. I bet we can together not just look at that, but also sort of track this tiger we call project management. And by the footprints that PMI is leaving, let's try to do some forecasting as well and see if we can actually predict what the next steps in project management are.
Or how projects should behave in the future too. I think, you know, even over my career, I've watched projects hone in on better and better approaches to delivering systems so that on time, on budget really means on time, on budget. And I'm really looking forward to, as you said, predicting what the new processes that are being put in place will help in those directions. So, you know, you asked me a question, I think it was last year sometime, and I still remember this. And I think you said, is there enough content or is there enough of a message to talk about for a full year in terms of what we want to do? And I'm going to have you answer that for yourself right now, because I'm saying yes. What do you think?
I can't even wrap around my head of how I would even estimate how much content and where I would begin. So number one, I like your approach. And number two, I'd like to add to it. For example, complexity. The 6th edition PMBOK did not even talk about complexity. The 7th edition introduces complexity and complex systems in such a way that we can actually use the last 20 years of exploration in managing complexity through data analysis in order to get a better handle. And so we can not only say, this is good stuff, we can say, this is so cool that it energizes us, and look at the direction it's taking us. And like you said, you know, we can actually be on the front of how projects and project management is being modified.
Well, and as I thought about this too, I'm not sure how much PMBOK 7 is relevant to what I'm about to say, but you know, we're coming out of a 2-year pandemic. We don't know if it's going to last. But there has been some maturing of, say, remote workspaces and remote work. You know, that's always, can we take PMBOK 7 or even the old PMBOK, older versions of PMBOK, and apply it to what we've learned through remote work? I mean, there's myriad of topics right there in terms of preparing not just our project managers, but our organizations that we're working for and our teams in terms of continuing on in this whole vein of remote work. So I think there's a endless supply of topics we can talk about.
Yeah. Now, to get back to the original question, okay? So we see project management as responding to the changes in our culture and our environment. Now, if we treat our show as a new project, Agile says we may have a big objective, like what you and I are talking about, but what if we don't have these small, very smart, measurable, achievable objectives, like we need to put together a plan? Does that feel all right for you?
You're asking an unfair question
I
to
know.
someone to someone who has spent their entire career in fixed price bids and predictive projects. So of course, if I bid a 4-year project, I want to know my entire project plan for the whole 4 years, Tim. But no, we're mature people here. I think we can handle this. We can handle a lack of specific direction.
This is why. This is exactly why I want to have this type of an Agile discussion with you. So here I was back in 2005, right? And in the middle of working with one of my finance clients, they were trying to figure out how to drive down the cost of their IT PC fleet management. And we were struggling. We were getting a 20 to 25% return on investment against the cost of the PCs and the cost of management and the ability to get people back up and running. And over lunch, the IT director and I were having a conversation. He said, Tim, you know, I don't know if you're looking at this from a financial perspective in a great way. He said, good golly, look at the power control that your computers have. I have one room alone with 5,000 computers. And what if I don't have to leave them all on every night to push patches? What if I can just have everybody lights out at 5 p.m. and then stage automatically and push patches and upgrade, and only have to tickle those computers a little bit to turn them on. And I only have to do 5 or 10% of them throughout a month. Do you know the power savings? And we started doing that on a paper napkin. And we went back and we whiteboarded out 126% return on investment. And it's like, I could have never had an internal conversation before going into this client and even, dream of, much less predict something like that.
So it'd be interesting to calculate the percentage of your lunch as if you paid $50 for your lunch, that was an incredible lunch meeting.
Well, not only that, but the results of that one project, because we thought outside the box and we allowed the objectives to change. I was able to create case studies and use cases and create marketing and sales material for our 5,000 sales reps in the corporation. Because they overhit all of their targets in sales that year for the product, I sent 3 people to Tahiti. Think about that. That's true value.
That is true value, especially for those salespeople.
Yeah. So this is, go ahead.
No, so based on what you just said, I am sensing that you will be all right for the next, I think we've mapped out 40 some or almost 50 podcasts for the year. You'd be okay if we swapped direction several times during this time, if it made sense to our audience.
Yeah. And that's where Agile comes in. And, I'm really glad you're getting the experience of Agile. One of the hardest things to actually teach and to expose somebody who is dyed-in-the-wool predictive is to get the idea that we want to keep things loose and flexible early on to look for these early opportunities, and to be able to do experiments and make mistakes early on in such a way that it doesn't hurt the project, and it expose these 126% returns on investment that we can take advantage of. So yeah, if we get to a point in our year and it shows that we're going off in another direction. Let's take it. Let's run this show as an agile experiment.
Oh, that would be great. Back to the PMBOK 7 in terms of some of the changes and some of the directional changes in course that they've done in terms of putting out the material for project managers to be guided by. What do you think are some of the major changes that we may want to be paying attention to, and that we can focus our audience on looking forward? Because here's where the premise I'm coming from is there really is nothing new under the sun. So PMBOK 7 may be represented as being new, but I suspect when you and I get into discussing it, that we will find parallels in our experience from even 20 years ago.
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and this is why. First of all, let's talk about the expectations of somebody taking an exam to gain a project management credential. They want the brass ring. What's the secret to passing the exam, right? What are the facts and figures? What do I need to measure, right? What do I need to memorize? And so the 6th edition was great for this. Measure your inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. Great. That's never what the exam was about. The exam was testing your ability to take that and solve problems. It is 100% problem-solving exam where it throws you into an issue and you have to resolve it. And you do that 180 times, right? In 3 hours, 50 minutes. And so that PMBOK really didn't do it. But the 7th edition doesn't take facts and figures. It takes principles against domains. It takes behaviors. It takes values. And it says, here's what we value, here's the principle, and here's the behavior. And so I think we have a lot of opportunity to say, here are the facts and figures, here's the technical part, but the behavior has to do about relationship, how we treat things, not just people, but how we treat our budgets, how we treat our schedules and risk and quality.
No, that's exactly right. And if people are listening, for those people who are listening to us today, I think that is something that we can absolutely get across. I remember early in my career, you get into this especially when you're a young project manager, you get into this mindset that if I have a good project schedule, and if I have all of my durations mapped out, and if I have all my estimates in place, how can I possibly fail, right? You get that mindset. Then I do my percent completes, and I do all of these things. And you get into that mindset. And I remember a senior project manager pulling me aside and say, that's all good, but if you don't have the right sort of attitude or right thought process around managing the projects, besides the arts and the charts and all that, you're just being foolish. And then he goes, and a fool with a tool is still a fool.
That's right. That's exactly right. And see, that's the beautiful thing about Agile. Agile is not a set of tools. Agile is a mindset. Scrum, and we'll talk about this later too, and it'll come up in one of our shows. Scrum is the tools. Scrum is the framework. Agile is the attitude and behavior. And so we have a lot of mileage that we can use in having this type of a discussion.
Yeah, that's not, and I don't want anybody to walk away from this show saying Merv does not believe in using tools. No, the tools are the lagging indicators of how well we're doing, but you still need that mindset. You just mentioned mindset. You still need that human relation, that ability to relate to people, to relate to what the pain points of your customer is. You need to be able to do all of that to be able to manage a project before you can even deal with the Gantt charts and the SPI calculations and all the kinds of things that we do.
Yeah, and to understand and get across the whole idea of the importance of mindset. Often in my classes, even international classes, I use the movie Karate Kid, and where Danielson is given a task: wax the cars, paint the fence, wax the cars, paint the fence. And he doesn't know why he's doing it. And it's totally meaningless, and he's frustrated until his teacher says, little do you know, I'm helping you develop your habits that you're going to need to win that championship. And all of a sudden, he waxes and paints the fence like he never has before. And so that mindset is where it really comes in handy. That's our motivation, and that's our drive. And as leaders and project managers, we can ask people to do stuff, but if they have a reason to do it and do it well, then they're going to do it much better than we could ever ask them.
Which is, you're just reminding me with the paint the fence analogy, which is better than Tom Sawyer, who is probably the ultimate manager in terms of getting everyone else to paint the fence for him, but he did it in a devious way. So that would not be a good example. I like the Karate Kid example. So in terms of our past discussions and even what we're talking about today, you had mentioned to me, I think in one of our conversations just over the telephone or whatever, you'd mentioned that you had come across some reading material that you were following right now on human-centered design. Mm-hmm. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that in terms of maybe that's a topic we can pull into this year?
Yes. So one of the things that we have been looking at, when I mean we, it's groups of thought leaders. One of the reasons why Agile appeared was that a project manager and a team would design something that was totally useless. You've had those projects where, where the deliverable is perfect and it's exactly not what they need. And that's, we have to call that project failure. So one of the ways we can look at human-centered design is voice of the customer. Understanding that this is not the project manager's deliverable or the team's deliverable or even the sponsor's deliverable. It's the people who are going to have to live with that thing day in and day out. And that's what we have to bake into our projects. But there's another part of this. Okay. I've been following a lot of the breakthroughs in the last 20 years in behavioral economics, in neuroplasticity, which means how do I change and modify my personal behavior? And there's a great tsunami of evidence that says we can change much more in our lives and the world around us than we ever realized. All we have to do is two sides of the coin. Number one, if you want people to do it, make it easy, fun, and engaging, right? That's all. Yeah. Make it fun. That's with our children, right? Make washing the dishes a game, and make it a celebration event every day. If you want people to not do things, make it complicated, hard to get through, and demotivating. Use your knowledge of human behavior in order to do this. And so when we talk about human-centered design, it's not just voice of the customer. It's the structure of our relationships and the actions, the activities of everybody who's touching the project.
Well, that is so true. In fact, whenever I went into a project, I would take my business analysts and systems analysts aside and say, within the next 3 or 4 months, you need to know the customer's business as well as the customer does. You need to know their policy as well as they do. When they say that this rule is found in this section, you need to say, no, it's found in this section. You need to know it that well. And what I found was because they then put themselves into the chair of their customer when they develop their analysis documents. And even in the agile approach, when you're sitting in the customer's chair, you're thinking like the customer, you're asking better questions, you're getting better requirements definition. And so what you're saying is exactly right. The technology will take care of itself after the fact. But if you don't get the right requirements right up front, you're not going to have a good system. So I think that's exactly right. The human-centered design is so important, and the human-centered aspects in terms of how it is that we look after our customers is so important.
Yeah, and it's going to give us a better result. Number two, it's going to make it easier and more fun for us to manage the project and manage the work. You and I have both been influenced around mentors who prioritize training and mentoring, who consciously schedule time in the day to work with people, to make sure people have what they need to get work done. And this is something else that I want to explore and actually give people an opportunity to experiment in their own projects. Training as a constant component, and not just us training, but giving people permission to train each other and mentor each other. So we're creating an environment of constant growth.
Boy, that's a hot topic. Along a lot of project managers will tell you, I have a fixed price schedule and a fixed price budget. I don't have time to send my people to training or to have them train on the job. So that's a great thought process that we can bring in at some point, because truly that is a project manager's challenge. How can I continue to keep my people up to speed even while I have a job to do and the executive on the client side is demanding that it be done on time?
Well, and it's critical in your world. I have a lot of project managers who have 6-month projects and 8-month projects and 10-month projects. Technology is not going to change. Right. Expectations are not going to change. But on your project, COVID, boom, 90-degree turn. Guess what? We all get to relearn.
We do. And, back to what we were just talking about earlier in terms of relationships. Well, I think probably had shared on previous podcasts that I had actually retired, and then was asked to help a former colleague who, by the way, found me by reading some blogs. We hadn't worked together in 20 years, found me by reading some of my blogs and said, would I bid with him on a certain project? We happened to have won, so I came out of retirement. But here's the kicker. It goes back to relationships. It goes back to that human-centric observation. And I had, because a lot of my personal references had retired themselves from their jobs, I had to scramble to find references. I found some who remembered me from over 20 years ago because of the entire human-centric approach that we put into place and made them look very good. And even after we were long gone, the system still worked well for them.
That's great. That's great. Yes, I think from a concept and a topic standpoint, this human-centeredness is not just something we should focus on this year, but is going to become more and more critical. And the beautiful thing is, there is such a rich wealth of knowledge and wisdom that comes with this. We've been studying this for over 2 decades.
Well, wouldn't it be nice if that became something that just became part of someone's behavioral process on a project where they don't even think about it? That you as a project manager or you as an IT analyst are so inserted into the life of your client and the betterment of them through the system you're building, that every thought process you have isn't for the system, it's for bettering their lives when you're gone.
So let's talk about this. One of the things that I do is I open up an electronic whiteboard on the screen while I'm talking to my students. And I say, here's my ethics over here, right? Here's my ethics, here's my values. What do they do for me? They create my morals. My morals are what's right or wrong. And I'm driven by my morals, which means my behavior is shaped by that. And my behavior and my values together are going to force me to do certain things in a certain way on a regular basis. And what does that create? That's where my muscle memory comes in. That's where my habits come in. And then with more and more habits, I forget that I'm doing this. It becomes natural and it becomes my working environment. I have a theory that says if you understand and carefully construct your values, your ethics, and your morals, and if you actually explore and practice them, you can change that world and do certain changes like what you're saying. Create a human-centered thing. What do we have? We have our team charter. What do we have? We have our ground rules. We have our norms. We have these tools in place, and they've been in place for over 20 years. All we have to do is figure out how to use them effectively. And that's where I want to have these discussions.
Well, and at the same time, we won't lose track for people who are thinking, oh, this is just going to be a philosophy major in project management. No, we're not going to lose track of the actual practical aspects of what it is that we're talking about. We still need the tools. We're still going to bring in the thought processes around the tools. But to me, I guess I don't look at it any different than if I were managing a hotel, or if I were managing a hospital, or if I were managing a grocery store. Grocery store shelves don't get, you walk into some of the local grocery stores here and they're beautiful. They're just structured. You can find things. They don't get that way unless the manager has worked well in a good relationship with the people who are stocking the shelves. So I think it's the human aspects. I don't know why it's such a new thing for project management. It should be an everyday thing as part of our normal behavior.
Yeah, we're at the end of the day, we're still managers, whether it's general business or projects. It's just that projects are self-contained, and because they're contained in a certain way, they apply a more conscious and a more disciplined approach to management. That's all. The leadership doesn't change. The people part doesn't change. It's the management that we need to express, and they go together.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're stuck with those time constraints, and time constraints create pressure, and pressure creates pressure on the way you behave as an individual.
Yeah. And that's where at the end of the day, we don't have time. Or let's just do things the same way, or let's put a patch on it and forget that it was a patch. I've done that a lot of times. I've caught myself saying to myself a lot of times, oh, it's just another. No, it never is just another day. It never is. And that's where our job, our careers, and our work environment can be a constant inspiration.
So where do we go from here? We've got 50 some sessions ahead. Well, 40 some sessions ahead of us, I guess. Where do we go from here?
So here's what I recommend.
Yeah.
Instead of us following the project management framework like we've done in the past, let's throw that out the window. Project Management Institute has something called an exam content outline, and it lists the tasks that a project manager performs. And PMI training content says, here's an illustration of all these tasks, and here's an illustration of how they're done with examples. And so what you and I can do is explore these tasks, and we can actually look at it from here's the tools that work well with these tasks, and here's the attitude that this task represents, and the mindset and the behaviors. So if we actually turn this stuff just 45 degrees, not 90 degrees, I think we can actually have not just an exploration of management and leadership and theory, but actually talk about things that matter and measure, and things we can take action on right today.
And it's not that we're going to be giving our listeners a free course in how to prepare for the exam, but I think we can give a lot of good pointers in how to prepare for the exam.
Yeah, let's set some stretch goals here. For the rest of the year, let's look at thinking about tools and thinking about behaviors and attitudes and thinking about experiments, as well as doing what we've done. I think we've done a really good job up to now. And now it's not that we did things wrong, but I think we can do things in a much more engaging manner.
Well, and in terms of how we did things last year, I think most of our podcasts from last year were based on our hits and misses during our careers. We learned a lot of things, probably more from some of our challenges than some of our victories. And so we were able to share that with our audience last year. So this year, I think we can still continue on with that experiential approach to project management, but bring in those new aspects that, and I don't want to say new, those newly described aspects of project management that we find in the new version of PMBOK.
Good. I'm in total agreement here. Now, for my last question. This is the question I always ask as the charter is approved or we start planning. What does success look like at the end of the year?
Well, for me, it's not actually, Tim, it's not, it's not for me. I've done my 40 years in project management and projects, and I'm still kind of giving back, but this is my giving back time. If something comes out of this, like a small consulting gig or something, that's great. But more importantly, I have benefited so much from this career we call project management, and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. So I want to be able to give back. I think that we have a very valuable career that, especially now as things become more and more automated in our world, that we need better and better and better and stronger project managers. I want to be able to impart into those people, into those who will be running our futures. It's just very good, solid techniques for managing projects.
Well, yeah, and from a leadership standpoint, this is an opportunity. For the last 20 years, I've had this internal conversation in my head, and people like Buckminster Fuller and I, and Peter Drucker and I, and W.E. Deming and I, and all of a sudden about 20 or 30 other people started showing up in the early 2000s, and they called it Agile. And they said, there is a much better way of approaching this work that makes it more humanistic, more fun, and more engaging, and that we can actually grow and business can profit more from it too. Yeah. So at the end of the year, actually, if we can sell this, and from your standpoint, I'm in your shoes too. I've had that career. I had that consulting gig where I had too many airline miles, and then my teaching, right? I just hit that 10,000 student mark in October, and I'm starting to think, what does teaching 100,000 people look like? What does reaching and doing that? And so I'm starting to think about, not numbers, but just general impact. And so success at the end of the year is like you. It's that giving back and making people aware of the fact that this is not just a career that's valuable and becoming more valuable, but it can be really enjoyable and satisfying too.
When I realized it was a very satisfactory career was when I was working on a project, and I went independent back in 2003. So I've been able to do my own thing basically and stay billable for most of that time. But I knew it was a good thing for me in terms of my sort of richness of life coming out of my career, was when I would be surprised when my invoice would be paid and it was in my bank account. It's like, oh yeah, oh yeah, that's good. I'm glad I got paid. That's good. But it's not something that, a lot of career people and some project managers are like this. It's like, man, 2 weeks before my next paycheck. No, this is not a paycheck career, although it's a good paycheck, but it's a career where we truly can improve the lives and well, the lives of people around us.
Exactly. Exactly. Both the people we work with and the people that interact with what we create.
Yeah.
This is a great opportunity.
But if I were to, excuse me, I picked up something here. If I were to look at, continue on this vein of what the success looked like at the end of the year, in keeping with what I said earlier, putting myself into the chair of those who are listening to us. So I think for the seasoned project manager, I would want them to say, I really need to pay more attention to the human factors, or to the people aspects, or to the human-centered part of this. For the new project manager, I might say, I really need to get the fundamentals and the understanding my client's business. I need to really understand how to do that. For the end user executive who is about to hire people like ourselves, or a system integrator to do a job for them, there's something in it for them as well. So again, success looks like, have I imparted some wisdom, some techniques for those kinds of audiences that they can use to better their project lives?
That's perfect. That is perfect. Okay. I think we're good. I think we have a roadmap here. And then as we develop our discussion, I think we're going to turn that roadmap into a really nice schedule.
I agree. I think this is going to be fun. And it probably will be a lot like last year. That some of our, anyway, I'm looking forward to it as well. I'm looking forward to surprising myself.
So from the perspective of a stand-up, let's do something here. For our next show, let's talk about human-centered design. And let's explore that. And let's figure out what that means for us personally, and what it can mean for project management. And we'll see what we can talk about. And let's go ahead and use that as our first topic this year.
And let's think about human-centered design out of the box. It's not just all about the system, right? It's not. So there's aspects of human-centered design that we can bring to our project. Yeah, that's an exciting topic. That's great.
Good deal. Okay, so in the meantime, as we're bowing out today and getting ready for our next show next Friday, where can people find you?
Probably the best is just connect with me on LinkedIn, Merv Jersak, or at People First Project Management. Let's just have a dialogue right there.
Okay, that'll be a good place. And for me as well. I'm Tim Jerome over at LinkedIn. You'll find me as a thought leader and project manager and trainer of aspiring project managers. So yeah, let's use that as our focus right now. And as we grow and mature in other areas of social media, we'll tell our audience.
Great. So until next week.
Sounds great. Thanks again. And thanks everybody for checking us out, and we'll talk to you soon.